Feel the sudden rush of adrenaline as we take you into the heart of life's most intense and dangerous moments. This is high-octane storytelling designed to keep your heart racing and your mind sharp. Hit subscribe now and get ready for the ultimate cinematic rush today. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 48 hours before my retirement dinner. I had spent 31 years building Callaway Mechanical from a two-man shop in my garage to a company with 60 employees and contracts across 3 states. Friday night was supposed to be the celebration. My wife had booked the private room at Harrington's Steakhouse. My daughter had flown in from Portland. My business partner of 22 years, the man I had trusted with everything, had helped plan the whole evening. That Tuesday morning, I picked up my phone and heard my daughter's voice, quiet, careful, like she was choosing each word with both hands. "Dad," she said, "I need you to come to the office early. Don't tell anyone. Just come. I want you to stop for a moment and think about what it feels like to walk into a building you own, built with your own hands and your own sacrifices, and suddenly feel like a stranger in it." That was me at 7:45 that morning, pushing open the glass door with my name etched into it, my heart already doing something it hadn't done in years. My daughter was standing in the conference room with the blinds drawn. She had not slept. I could see that immediately. The look a parent never mistakes, the hollowed-out eyes, the tension running through her jaw like a wire pulled too tight. On the table in front of her was a manila folder, a yellow legal pad with handwritten notes, and a cup of coffee gone cold. "Sit down, Dad," she said. I sat. She pushed the folder across the table without a word. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a bank statement. The account number was not one I recognized, but the name on the header was one I knew better than almost any name in the world. My business partner, my best friend of over 2 decades. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding, held my daughter when she was 3 days old, talked me out of selling the company when we hit rock bottom in 2009. I stared at the numbers. I turned the page. Another statement. Another. A pattern emerging like a bruise, spreading slowly across skin, so gradual you almost don't notice until you can't look away. "How long?" I said. My voice came out steady. "I don't know how." "At least 4 years," my daughter said. "Possibly longer. I only found the first account by accident." She told me then how it started. She had been reconciling vendor invoices 2 weeks earlier. Routine work. The kind that makes your eyes glaze over. When a payment amount didn't match the purchase order it was supposed to correspond with. A small difference. $47. Most people would have chalked it up to a clerical error and moved on. My daughter is not most people. She pulled the thread. The $47 discrepancy led her to a vendor account she didn't recognize. That account had been set up 18 months earlier, approved with my business partner's signature, billing us for equipment maintenance services on a quarterly schedule. The company name looked legitimate at first glance, industrial sounding, professional. But the address was a mailbox at a UPS store off exit 14 on Route 9. She didn't say anything to anyone. She just kept pulling. I sat in that conference room and listened to my daughter dismantle 22 years of trust, piece by piece. And what I remember most is not anger. Not yet. But a kind of stillness. Like the moment after a car accident when the world has stopped moving and you are still trying to understand what just happened to you. The total, across all the accounts she had found so far, was just over $340,000. "There may be more," she said quietly. "I haven't gone back further than 4 years." I closed the folder. I looked at my daughter, this woman who had interned here summers in college, who had joined full-time 6 years ago, who had earned every inch of her position through work I had never made easier just because she was mine. And I felt something shift in my chest. Not grief. Not yet. Something older and harder than grief. "Does he know you found this?" I asked. "No," she said. "I don't think so." "Good," I said. "We're going to need a lawyer before he does." What I haven't told you yet, the part my daughter still didn't know that morning, the piece that would surface 2 days later and change the shape of everything, was something I had noticed 6 months earlier and chosen, stupidly, to explain away. A lunch my business partner had canceled with no real reason given. A vendor relationship he had taken over from our operations manager without much explanation. A comment his wife had made at our company picnic in July. Something small and offhand that had launched in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't reach. I had been 63 years old, and I had told myself I was imagining things. That a man who had sat with me in the waiting room while my wife was in surgery, who had driven 4 hours to be at my mother's funeral, who had shaken my hand on a handshake deal we'd kept for over 2 decades, that man did not have a secret life running parallel to the one I thought I knew. I was wrong, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to that Tuesday. I spent the rest of that morning on the phone with an attorney named Patricia Oakes, who had been recommended to me by a friend in the industry. I told her what my daughter had found. She told me what I needed to do, in what order, and how to do it without alerting him before we were ready. Do not confront him, she said. Not yet. Every conversation you have with him before Friday is a conversation he can use to prepare. Friday is my retirement dinner, I said. He helped plan it. There was a pause on the line. Do you want to cancel it? She said. I thought about that for a long moment. I thought about the private room at Harrington's, the 60 people who had been invited, my daughter who had flown in from Portland, and I thought about him. About the ease in his face the last time I had seen him, the way he had clapped me on the shoulder and said, 2 more days, old man. No, I said. I don't want to cancel it. Patricia understood exactly what I meant. For the next 48 hours, my daughter and I worked. We are not dramatic people by nature. We are methodical people. The kind built by decades of running a company where problems don't get solved by yelling. They get solved by sitting down, laying out every piece of information, and working through it in order. That is what we did, she compiled. I verified. She had already photographed every document and saved copies to a secure drive-off in work. Patricia's paralegal came to the office on Wednesday evening after everyone else had gone home and went through the accounts with us for 3 hours. By the time we were done, what my daughter had found in a single afternoon of pulling the $47 thread had grown into something that covered parts of the business I had never suspected. The shell company for equipment maintenance, a second entity, a real one, incorporated in a neighboring state 2 years ago that had been receiving referral payments from 2 of our largest suppliers, a line of credit taken out against company assets, using a signature I did not remember giving. My attorney said she would need a handwriting specialist, that it may have been forged, that this alone elevated things considerably. I did not sleep well on Wednesday night. I lay in the dark and replayed moments, conversations, business trips he had taken on behalf of the company, decisions I had deferred to him on because he was handling that side of things, because we had been partners long enough that I didn't need to double-check, because trust is the thing that makes a partnership work, and I had given him mine without reservation for more than 2 decades. My wife sat beside me that night and did not press me to talk. She has known me for 38 years. She knew the shape of what was happening in my chest without me having to name it. At some point, she took my hand in the dark and held it, and that was enough. The call I mentioned, the one that came 48 hours before the dinner, had not been from my daughter. I should clarify that. My daughter had told me about the accounts in person. The call that morning had come earlier, at 6:52 a.m., from a number I didn't recognize at first. I almost let it go to voicemail. It was a man named Gerald. He had worked for the same supplier we'd had a relationship with for over a decade. He had left that company 3 months earlier. He had been thinking, he said, about whether to call me. He had decided he needed to. I don't want anything from you, he said, before I could ask. I just think you should know. What Gerald told me in 15 minutes of careful, measured words was this, that 2 years ago he had been present at a meeting between his former employer and my business partner. That in that meeting, my business partner had described himself as the sole operating decision-maker for our company, not as a partner, but as the owner. That the arrangement discussed in that meeting had been presented to Gerald's employer as one that did not require my knowledge or approval. I thought it was strange, Gerald said, but I wasn't in a position to make waves at the time. I'm sorry it took me this long. I thanked him. I wrote down his contact information and passed it to Patricia within the hour. By Thursday afternoon, we had enough. I want to tell you what the retirement dinner was like, because it matters. Harrington's Steakhouse on a November evening. The private room in the back with the wood paneling and the low lighting and the round table set with white tablecloths. 60 people, some of whom had been with Callaway Mechanical from nearly the beginning. Our operations manager, who had been with us 17 years. Our lead fabricator, who still remembered working out of the garage. Vendors and contractors, and a few personal friends. People whose faces I knew well enough to read across the room. My business partner arrived at 6:15 with his wife. He was wearing the navy blazer he favored for occasions like this, and he was relaxed in the way of a man who has no idea the floor has already been removed from underneath him. He hugged my wife. He shook hands with people he knew. He came to me and said, with what looked like genuine warmth, "You ready for the next chapter, old man?" "More than you know," I said. I introduced everyone. I let the dinner proceed. Speeches were given. My operations manager said things that made me have to look at the ceiling for a moment. My daughter spoke, and what she said about what it had meant to work alongside me, I will carry that for the rest of my life. Then I stood up. I thanked everyone for being there. I talked about 31 years. I talked about what it means to build something with your hands and your time and your belief that the work matters. I talked about the people in that room who had made it possible. And then I said that before I sat down, I needed to acknowledge my business partner specifically. I said there were things I had only recently learned about his contributions to the company. I said that his work, all of his work, would be receiving the full attention it deserved, starting Monday morning. I watched his face. I have run a company for 3 decades. I have been in negotiations, in disputes, in situations where I needed to read the person across from me accurately. I watched his face go through 4 distinct changes in approximately 3 seconds. Warmth, confusion, a flicker of something else. And then, beneath the social composure, the dawning. He knew. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that I knew something. Enough to understand that what was coming was not a celebration. 2 of Patricia's associates were present that evening, seated near the back. Not as lawyers, as guests, as far as anyone knew. Documents do not get delivered at dinner. That is not how this works. But they were there, and when the evening concluded and my business partner moved to leave, Patricia was waiting for him in the lobby with a package and 2 witnesses. I did not watch that part. I had said what I needed to say. I walked out the side entrance with my wife and my daughter into the November cold, and the 3 of us stood in the parking lot for a moment without speaking. "You okay?" my daughter said. "I will be," I said. And I meant it, what I have not yet told you. The thing my daughter discovered on Thursday, the day before the dinner, the piece that added a dimension to all of this I had not anticipated, was about his wife. I had known her almost as long as I had known him. She had been at our wedding. She had been at my mother's funeral alongside her husband. She and my wife had been close in the way that the spouses of business partners sometimes become close. Not best friends, but woven into the fabric of each other's lives in ways that are real. What my daughter found, while pulling one final thread through the financial records, was a series of transfers. Small amounts, small enough to pass unnoticed in ordinary review, moving from one of the shell accounts into a personal account. The personal account was in her name only, not a joint account, hers alone. My daughter came to me with this on Thursday morning. She set the printout on my desk and waited. I looked at it for a long time. "She knew," I said. Not a question. "At least some of it," my daughter said. "Maybe all of it." I thought about the comment at the company picnic, the offhand remark I had half heard and chosen to interpret charitably. I thought about my wife, who had trusted her. I thought about what it costs a person to find out that the life they believed they were living was, in some important ways, a performance stage for their benefit. I did not include that detail in what I said at the dinner. That conversation, the one with my wife, happened privately the night before, in our kitchen, with the lights low and 2 cups of tea going cold on the table between us. My wife is a composed woman. She listened. She asked 3 precise questions. And then she was quiet for a long time. "I want to call her myself," my wife said finally. "That's your call to make," I said. She did, the following week. I don't know exactly what was said. My wife has not shared all of it, and I have not pushed. What I know is that the call lasted 40 minutes, and when my wife came back into the room, she sat down and she said she knew for 2 years. And then she said nothing else for a while. and I sat with her in that silence and let it be what it was. The legal process is ongoing. I will not detail what I cannot yet speak to publicly. What I can tell you is that the company is intact. My daughter is now the acting CEO while the transition is completed, a title she has earned through work I would have recognized regardless of whose daughter she was. Our attorney tells us that the evidentiary record my daughter built, starting from $147 discrepancy, is as clean and thorough as she has seen in 20 years of practice. Patricia said that to me specifically. She said, "Your daughter saved your company." She said it plainly, the way lawyers say things when they are stating a fact, and not a compliment. I thought about all the years I had spent building something, all the faith I had placed in a partnership I believed was equal and honest, all the moments I had looked at my business partner and felt grateful that I didn't have to do this alone. I thought about the version of retirement I had imagined, the one where I handed off the company to a legacy I could feel proud of, where I walked out the door and knew that everything I had built was in trustworthy hands. That version is still true. It is just that the hands I am leaving it in are not the ones I expected. There's a verse my mother used to say when things went sideways. She said it in the small, plain way of a woman who had grown up with not much and had made the most of every bit of it. She said that the truth does not expire. It is patient. It will find its way to the surface regardless of how deep it has been buried, regardless of how much effort has gone into keeping it down. It surfaces when it is ready, or when someone is brave enough to pull the thread. My daughter pulled the thread. I have been asked, since this became something I have spoken about, whether I regret not seeing it sooner, whether I feel foolish, whether I should have looked closer, questioned more, trusted less. Here's what I have decided about that. A man who trusts completely is not a fool. He is a man who chooses to live without armor. That choice costs something when it turns out the person on the other side was not who you believed them to be. That cost is real, and I am not going to pretend it doesn't register. But the alternative, a life in which I distrusted everyone, verified everything, assumed the worst of the people closest to me, that is not a life I want, even in retrospect. I would rather be the man I was and learn what I have learned than be the kind of man who never gets hurt because he never truly lets anyone in. My wife and I are planning a trip to Sedona in the spring. My daughter and I have lunch every Thursday. The company employs 61 people now. We hired one more last month, a young fabricator right out of trade school who reminds me of myself 35 years ago. The retirement dinner happened. It just did not end the way anyone expected. That, I've come to understand, is not a tragedy. It is the story. And the story ends with the right people standing in the right places, which is all you can ask for when the dust finally settles. I am 63 years old, and I am still learning. I am grateful for every lesson, even the ones that arrive in manila folders on the Tuesday morning with the blinds drawn and the coffee already cold. If you are watching this and something in your life is not adding up, some small discrepancy, some detail that doesn't fit, some quiet thing you have been explaining away, I want to say this to you directly. Do not ignore it. Pull the thread. You may not like what you find, but you will always be better served by the truth than by the comfortable version of events you have constructed to avoid it. The truth does not expire. My mother was right about that. What would you have done if you discovered this the night before the biggest evening of your career? Let me know in the comments. And as someone in your life has shown you the kind of loyalty my daughter showed me, tell me about them. Those are the people worth celebrating. Thank you for watching. This is hs-sweetrevenge, and we will see you in the next story. There's something I have been thinking about since all of this came to light. Something that took me a while to find the right words for. The choices a person makes do not disappear. They accumulate. Every decision to take what isn't yours, to deceive someone who trusts you, to build a false version of yourself and present it daily to the people closest to you. Those decisions stack up, quietly, like weight on a structure that was never designed to carry them. You may not see the damage for years. The structure may look fine from the outside, but the load is always there, and at some point the load becomes more than the structure can hold. That is what I watched happen, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the kind of slow inevitability that, looking back, I can trace to specific moments, specific choices, specific days when a different decision would have led somewhere entirely different. I spent a long time after this wondering whether I had failed somewhere, whether I had been careless or naive, or whether my trust had been a kind of weakness I should have corrected sooner. I have come to believe that is the wrong question. The right question is not what I did wrong. The right question is what I will do with what I now know. A person with genuine integrity does not need to be watched. They behave the same whether or not anyone is looking, whether or not the accounts are being reconciled, whether or not there is a $47 discrepancy waiting to be found. That consistency between who you are in private and who you present in public is not a small thing. It is the foundation that everything else is built on. When it is absent, the whole structure is hollow, no matter how solid it appears from the street. My daughter understood this instinctively. She did not let discomfort stop her from looking. She did not talk herself out of what the numbers were telling her. She followed the truth where it led, even knowing that where it led would be painful for people she loved. That is not a small act of courage. That is exactly the kind of clear-eyed, disciplined thinking that protects everything or is protecting. What I want you to take from my story is this. Your attention is an act of care, paying close attention to the things that matter to you. Your work, your relationships, your finances, the details that other people might dismiss as too small to bother with, is not paranoia. It is responsibility. It is the practical expression of valuing what you have built. My daughter paid attention. And because she paid attention, what I had built for 31 years is still standing. I am not a bitter man. I was tested, and I came through it, and I came through it because the right people were beside me. That is more than enough to be grateful for. Build carefully. Pay attention. Choose the people beside you with as much care as you choose anything else in your life. And when something doesn't add up, no matter how small, no matter how inconvenient the timing, pull the thread. The truth is always worth finding.